Ethan Roy swept into the marble-floored mall with the quick steps of someone used to moving fast. He wore a crisp, dark suit that fit him like a second skin, the fabric smooth against his broad shoulders. His dark hair was styled neatly, but a few strands fell across his forehead as he stormed past designer shops and glittering display windows. Normally, he took his time in the mall, admiring the latest watches or custom-made shoes. Today, though, he felt tightness in his chest and an urge to rush straight through. It was a meeting he could not be late for, and in his mind every second counted. He passed a luxury boutique where mannequins wore gowns that cost more than some people earned in a year. He barely saw them. He felt only annoyance at the families milling in the walkways, blocking his path with strollers and shopping bags. Little children darted out from between adults, their laughter echoing, and he frowned at every parent who didn't keep them in line. He had come here for a quick errand, one small purchase, and now he found himself stuck in a slow, crowded environment that tested his patience more than he liked to admit. A mall security guard nodded as Ethan strode by, his polished shoes clicking on the glossy floor tiles. The guard wore a neat uniform and a polite smile. Ethan barely returned it. He was too focused on the clock ticking in his mind. He was already 10 minutes behind his schedule. He needed to pick up a gift for a client, drop it off at his downtown office, and then make it to the board meeting before lunch. In his world, being late was not an option. He almost collided with a mother pushing a cart loaded with shopping bags and a bulky diaper bag. She looked flustered as she tried to corral her 3-year-old in a stroller beside her. The stroller's wheels squeaked, and the girl inside squealed with delight at a toy she held. Ethan's jaw tightened as he sidestepped the stroller, careful not to run into the little girl, but irritated by the slow pace. He tapped his watch and sighed out loud, as if the sound would hurry the crowds. Just ahead, a father and daughter paused in front of a jewelry store window. The glass held rows of sparkling necklaces and glittering rings. The girl's eyes were wide with wonder, and the father leaned down to point at a diamond pendant. They talked softly, laughter in their voices. Ethan narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath to calm the twist in his chest. He thought about how lucky some people were to have the time to browse and enjoy these moments. But for him, time was. Money and delays were unacceptable. Turned the corner, eyes scanning for the boutique he needed. The window shifted to a shop that sold handcrafted leather goods briefcases, wallets, belts. He needed a custom briefcase for that client, engraved with initials. The display was perfect. Rich brown leather, fine stitching, a gleaming nameplate. Ethan moved closer and reached out to touch the leather's smooth surface through the glass. It felt cool and inviting, a contrast to his fraying nerves. At that moment, a family of 4 drifted past, blocking his view for a split second. Father held a toddler in his arms. The mother steadied the older child, who asked questions in a loud voice. Ethan cleared his throat and edged to the side. He had places to be. He lifted his hand and gave the display case a faint tap, just enough to let them know he was there. The mother glanced at him, surprised, and hurried ahead. Ethan let out a soft curse under his breath, stepped back and then forward again, trying to find the right angle. He reached with one foot to clear a rolled shopping cart that had been left unattended near the bench. As his toe made contact, the cart teetered slightly. Frustration swept over him, and before he realized what he was doing, he gave the cart a sharp kick. The metal wheels spun with a loud clang that echoed in the hallway, making people look up. He froze instantly. The sound was too loud. His breath caught in his throat. He looked down at the cart, expecting it to roll away into the wall. But something else happened. A small, high-pitched whimper came from inside. Ethan's heart lurched. He crouched down for a better look. The cart was empty of bags. Instead, a soft-faced baby stroller had been placed inside it. And there, bundled in matching pink coats, were twin girls no older than 2. Their big eyes were rimmed with tears, and they trembled as they clutched each other's hands. Ethan's pulse pounded against his temples. How long had they been left alone? Who had put them in that cart? His mind raced with guilt and alarm. He had kicked something worthless. He had thought an empty cart. He had not known. Not worthless. They were helpless and afraid. He felt hot with shame. His own childhood had been lonely at times too. He remembered nights in a grand but empty house, echoing with silence when his parents had been away on business. His father had stormed in too, the study and slammed doors. His mother had brushed past in silks and pearls, too busy to see his tears. He had learned early to rely on himself and bury his feelings. Now looking into those twin faces, Ethan felt every ache of that old loneliness come back. He reached out with a trembling hand, brushing aside the soft lining of the cart. The babies, huddled together and whimpered louder. He knelt fully, keeping his face low, so he did not terrify them. "It's okay," he said in a low, hushed tone. His voice sounded odd to his own ears, gentle, small, almost like something he might hear in a lullaby. "It's okay, I'm here now." His business suit felt too rigid, too formal for this. He unfastened his jacket and draped it over the edge of the cart to make a soft barrier. He stood up and glanced around wildly. People had stopped walking and stared. Some whispered to each other. A security guard in a dark blue uniform approached cautiously, steps slow and careful. Ethan held up his empty hand. "I'll handle this," he said quickly, voice firm. He knelt beside the cart again and leaned closer to the twins. "Can you tell me your names?" He tried to smile softly, even though his own heart raced. "What?" Baby sniffled and said something that was more of a sound than a word. She reached for her sister's hand. Ethan followed her finger to a small tag pinned to the Coda name tag that said Anna. The other tag, pinned the same way, said Lily. His breath caught. Anna and Lily. He looked up at the guard. "They need their parents," he said. "Do you know where they are?" The guard spoke into his radio and kept one hand on his belt. Ethan felt useless standing there. He almost hated himself for feeling useless. He was a man who had built companies from scratch, made billions, solved impossible problems, and here he was, frozen beside a children's cart. He took a deep breath and steadied himself. He looked down at Anna and Lily, their tears damp on their rosy cheeks. He raised both hands, as if in surrender, and spoke softly again. "I'm Ethan," he said. "I'm going to help you find your mommy." He gave the guard a quick look. "Let's do it quietly. No need to scare them more." The guard nodded and slipped out his phone. As Ethan waited, he realized how still the mall had become around him. Shoppers paused, security cameras turned toward him, and the twin girls clung tightly together. Ethan thought of his high-rise office, his sleek cars, his carefully planned day. None of that mattered now. All he saw were two tiny lives depending on him not to panic again. His breath slowed, his mind focused. Then, through the crowd, a frantic mother appeared. Her face went pale when she saw the scene. She rushed forward, tears in her own eyes. Ethan stood and stepped aside, watching as she hugged her children, rocked them, and whispered promises. The twins stopped crying, burying their faces into their mother's coat. Ethan felt something shift deep inside him. He patted his suit pocket, feeling the outlines of his phone and wallet. He had come here, thinking only of deals and deadlines. Now he left knowing that sometimes the biggest moments were not on any calendar. Ethan felt his heart pounding so loudly he thought the whole mall might hear it. He stood frozen beside the cart, gazing down at the two twin girls. Their tiny faces, streaked with tears, looked up at him in panic. Ethan had expected a silent, empty cart rolling away on its own. He had not imagined finding children inside. Now he realized how close he had come to hurting them with that kick. His cheeks burned and he swallowed hard, trying to steady himself. All around him, people continued on their way as if nothing had happened. A woman in high heels passed without a glance. A group of teenagers on their phones laughed and moved. Ahead, only a few shoppers stopped, curious, but no one rushed to help. It felt like the world had turned its back on these little girls, leaving Ethan to face their fear alone. He crouched down again, pressing his palms against his knees. He tried to focus on the soft sound of their breathing and crying to calm himself. It was the same breath he had used when speaking in boardrooms, when closing deals, when commanding entire teams. But now, his breath trembled. He glanced over his shoulder, scanning the corridor. Storefronts glowed with bright lights. Shoe shops, jewelry stores, electronics outlets. A large ornamental fountain sat nearby, its water glittering. In the midday sun that streamed through the glass ceiling, few people paused by the fountain. None seemed to see the children in distress. Ethan realized that in the rush of their own errands, shoppers had become blind to everything but their next purchase. Drawing in a slow breath, Ethan tried again to speak in a gentle voice. "Hi there," he said, voice low. "My name is Ethan. I'm here to help." One of the twins, the one on the left, blinked at him through wet lashes. Her lips quivered as she tried to speak, but only a small sound came out. The other twin pressed closer behind her sister, hiding her face. Ethan leaned forward and offered his hand, palm up. He waited, imagining he was offering a lifeline. After a moment, the older twin, if she was older, reached out and touched his fingers. She felt warm and tiny against his skin. Ethan carefully reached in and scooped both girls into his arms, supporting them under their arms so they would not slip. They both hugged him around the neck, their tears dampening his suit, held them close, rocking a little like he might have seen a father. The feeling was strange to him. He had never held a child like this. The boardrooms and conferences had never required a soft touch. Yet here he was, cradling two frightened strangers with more tenderness than he knew he possessed. "Don't worry," Ethan whispered. "I've got you." He spoke each word slowly, letting the promise sink in. The stench of coffee from a nearby cafe floated through the air, mixed with the sweet smell of perfume from a cosmetic counter. He tried to focus on the senses around him, to calm the swirling panic in his chest. He reminded himself that children could sense fear. If he panicked, they might panic more. Behind him, the guard spoke quietly into his radio. Ethan heard the crackle of static and a distant voice responding. He glanced over his shoulder and saw the guard motioning to another security officer. The two officers approached with calm steps. Their faces were kind but serious. One held out a pair of latex gloves. The other carried a small child's blanket folded neatly. Ethan accepted the blanket and draped it over the twins' shoulders. The soft fabric felt comforting against their coats. "You did well," the guard said softly to Ethan. "We're finding their parents now." Ethan nodded, still holding the girls. He squeezed gently, feeling the tiny bones under their coats. They shivered, not from cold, but from fear. He looked down at the name tags pinned to their coats again, at Anna and Lily. He tried to memorize those names so he could speak to them personally. "Anna, Lily," he repeated under his breath. "I'll keep you safe." He glanced toward the cafe area where the guard had been speaking on his radio. Several officers now stood in a small circle, shaking their heads and pointing at security. Cameras mounted on the walls. Ethan realized the parents might already be on their way. Guided by CCTV, he looked back at the twins and offered a small smile. "I think your mommy or daddy is coming. They'll be so happy to see you." He tried to sound certain, but he felt his voice catch with worry. What if they were not found soon? The larger group of shoppers around them began to notice the scene. Some whispered to each other. A few mothers looked uncomfortable, probably thinking about how easy it could have been for their own children to wander off. A teenage girl took out her phone and whispered into it, likely recording or calling someone. Ethan wished they would look away, give him space to comfort Anna and Lily. He did not want the moment to become a spectacle. Taking another deep breath, he shifted the girls so one sat on each hip. Felt awkward, holding them both, like he wasn't sure if he was doing it right. He remembered reading once that parents learn to walk again after having twins born prematurely. He thought about how heavy these little girls would be when they were fully grown. But right now, he focused on their eyes, the two blue orbs, reflecting their fear and relief. I tried to meet their gaze, without letting them see how unsettled. He nudged his head toward a bench nearby, one he had noticed on his way in. It looked polished and made of dark wood. He tucked the girls' coats under them and set them down gently so they could sit. They sat close together, holding hands. Ethan knelt before them, keeping his face level with theirs. "You two did very good," he told them. "Now let's take some deep breaths together." He closed his eyes, inhaled slowly, and exhaled. He waited for them to copy him. After a moment, he saw both heads mimic his movement, their chests. Rising and falling was a small victory. The guard next to him patted his shoulder. "They're safe," he said. "Their parents are on their way." CCTV spotted a man and woman running toward the east entrance. Ethan nodded, relief washing through him like cool water. His own tension eased. He looked at Anna and Lily, whose tears had slowed. They watched him with cautious eyes, curious. About this tall man who had saved them, the mall clock chimed, echoing through the high ceiling. It was 11:30. Ethan's watch had been right. He was late. A normal day, he would feel a sharp sting of irritation at being delayed. But in that moment, all he cared about was making sure the twins were okay. He closed his eyes for a moment and remembered how freezing a child felt when abandoned. He thought of the nights he had spent alone in his cold mansion and how he had wanted someone to care. He realized he had carried that longing into adulthood, seeking success and control to fill a void. Yet nothing had mattered more than those twins' safety now. He opened his eyes and smiled gently. "You both are very brave," he said. "Mom and Dad will be here soon." He glanced down the corridor, expecting to see running parents. Wondered what they would say to him. A flurry of emotion passed through him, gratitude for being there. Guilt for his moment of anger, pride for doing the right thing. He reached out and brushed a stray curl from the older twin's forehead as she leaned into him again. Nearby, a cleaning crew moved luggage carts and garbage bins. One of the workers looked over and gave Ethan a thumbs up. The small gesture of approval warmed his heart. He nodded back. For a billionaire used to applause at stock exchanges, a simple thumbs up from a stranger felt more meaningful than any boardroom praise. A few minutes later, he saw a man sprinting down the hallway. The man wore a business suit and had a woman beside him, her hair tied in a loose ponytail. Their faces were full of panic and relief as they rounded the corner. "Anna." "Lily," the woman cried, dropping her purse and rushing toward the cart. The children stood and ran to her, arms outstretched. The man scooped them into his arms, tears in his own eyes. Ethan stood and stepped back, watching the reunion. The parents hugged, their daughters tightly whispering apologies and "I'm so sorry." The twins clung to them, still trembling. Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He stepped forward and cleared his throat softly. "Excuse me," he said. The father looked up, eyes red. Ethan extended his hand. "I'm Ethan Royce," he said, voice even. "I was here when you found them." The mother took his hand in both of hers, tears rolling down her cheeks. "Thank you," she said, voice shaking. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Ethan shook his head. "I'm just glad they're safe." The mother nodded. "They wandered away," she said. "We didn't see them get into the cart." She bit her lip. "I feel terrible." Ethan smiled kindly. "Don't blame yourself," he said. "Kids are quick. They're curious. It could happen to anyone." The father nodded, still holding the twins close. Ethan peeked at his watch again. It was 11:20. He was hours late for his meeting now. But he did not hurry away. He stayed a moment longer, watching the family gather their things and walk toward the exit. He felt a swell of something unfamiliar warmth, connection, the sense that helping these girls mattered more than any deal he would ever close as they disappeared through the glass doors. Ethan straightened his suit jacket and smoothed his hair. He took one last look at the empty cart and the quiet hallway. He felt different now, changed in a way he could not explain. He turned and walked toward the boutique he had been headed for earlier, act of being there for someone in need. Ethan stepped out of the boutique with a polished leather briefcase in hand. The rich scent of the leather mixed with the mall's air, warm and scented with coffee and perfume. He paused near a window, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Settle in his mind, the gift would wait. Right now, he needed to think. He closed his eyes for a moment and remembered the day he learned what true fear felt like. When Ethan was 6 years old, his family lived in a grand house on a quiet street. The halls were always silent, except for the soft hum of the heating system and the distant ticking of clocks. His parents were often away on trips, meeting powerful people, signing deals and attending gala events. He stayed home with a nanny, who cooked meals and read him bedtime stories. But one evening the nanny was late to dinner, and Ethan wandered from room to room, searching for her. He found her in the nursery, lying on the floor, her eyes closed. He ran to her side, shaking her shoulder, but she did not wake up. He screamed for help. Parents rushed in hours later, panicked and angry. They blamed him for the delay and sent him to his room without dinner. That night, Ethan's tears soaked his pillow as he realized that no one was coming to save him. The memory rose sharply now, as clear as the mall's bright lights. He had felt helpless then, small and forgotten. He had buried that feeling under years of work, board meetings, and business titles. He had built companies, closed million-dollar deals, and shaped industries. He had learned to push down any trace of weakness. But as he stood in the mall corridor, the echoes of Anna and Lily's cries had unlocked that old fear. He placed his hand on his heart, feeling the steady beat that answered his pounding mind. A young mother passed by, her toddler swinging on her hand. The child looked up at Ethan, blinking curiously, then tugged the mother forward. Ethan smiled gently at them, remembering how children trusted him even when he felt unworthy. He turned and walked toward a seating area near an indoor garden. Artificial trees and planters made the space calm and green. He sank into a leather chair and set the briefcase on the table beside him. He opened his own briefcase and took out his phone. The screen glowed with missed calls and unread messages. He had calls from his assistant reminding him of the noon meeting, text messages from the client's office asking for confirmation, and a voicemail from his brother asking why he had missed their weekly dinner. He stared at the long list and felt a pang of guilt. He had spent so much time building his empire that he had lost sight of what mattered. He realized he had chased success to escape emptiness, but his heart still throbbed from cradling those twins in the cart. He slid the phone back into its slot. The world could wait a few more minutes. He leaned back and let his gaze drift across the garden. A fountain bubbled quietly and soft music played from hidden speakers. A cluster of orchids bloomed in deep purple, their petals smooth like satin. A few shoppers sat on benches, scrolling on their phones or sipping drinks. All looked peaceful. Ethan breathed in slowly, as though the gentle scene would soothe the ache inside him. He remembered another time he felt that at Quain his first company failed. He had poured every ounce of his energy into it, working nights and weekends, believing in the vision. On launch day, the software crashed and investors pulled out. He had lost money, reputation, and confidence. He thought he would never recover. But he woke up the next morning, wiped his tears, and started again. He learned that failure did not define him. He stood up to face the next challenge. That same strength had driven him through boardrooms and negotiations. But comfort and strength were not the same as compassion and presence. A mall announcement system crackled, and a soft voice announced a special sale at a nearby store. Ethan shook his head and closed his eyes again. He did not care about sales today. What he cared about was the moment a child felt safe, he thought, of Anna's trembling lips and Lily's wide eyes. He pictured that after the panic, they would remember a stranger's kindness. He wanted to be that kind stranger more often. A sudden tap on his shoulder made him start. He looked up to see a security officer handing him a small card. "You drop this back there," the officer said. Ethan took the card, seeing his own name printed in elegant letters. It was a membership card for the mall's private lounge, one he had not used. He thanked the officer, and the guard nodded before walking away. Ethan studied the card in his hand. He realized he had owned many cards, keys to exclusive rooms and VIP areas, all designed to give him comfort and status. But none of them had led him back to the simple joy he had found helping those twins. He slipped the card into his coat pocket and closed the briefcase. He needed a plan of action. He had no idea who Anna and Lily's parents were, but he could support children's charities in the area. He could use his resources to make sure no child felt abandoned in a busy place. He reached into his pants pocket and pulled out his business card. He flicked open the metal holder and selected a clean card. He scribbled a note on the back: "To help children in need, contact me." He tucked this card into the briefcase and closed the lid. Then he reached for his phone again and dialed his assistant, Maya. She answered on the first ring. Can you push my lunch meeting to this afternoon? I have an urgent commitment. Also arrange 3 meetings with local children's charities and social workers for this week. Send me a list of options. He paused, listening as Maya responded. Her calm, efficient voice was a comfort. He hung up and exhaled deeply. He had just changed his schedule to meet with people who helped vulnerable children. It felt right. He looked toward the main entrance and imagined seeing Anna and Lily's parents rushing in. He wondered if they would notice him among the crowd and smile a brief thank you. Smiled at the thought a small act of kindness could create ripples far beyond a single moment. He rose from the chair, feeling steadier and lighter. He picked up the briefcase and began to walk again, but not toward the boutique. He moved toward the information desk in the center of the mall. At the desk, he found a young woman in a uniform, scanning names on a computer screen. He tapped her shoulder politely. "Excuse me," he said. "I'd like to know if you have contact information for the parents of Anna and Lily, the twins. Left in a shopping cart near the fountain, I'd like to send them a note and a small gift as a gesture of support." She looked up, surprised, and then typed quickly. "One moment, sir." She scrolled through her records and then turned to him. "I'm sorry, sir. We can't share their personal information for privacy reasons. But I can forward your note and gift request to them through our Lost and Found office. They'll contact you if they wish." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Please do that," he said. "I'd appreciate it." He handed her the card with his message. She took it and slipped it into an envelope on her desk. "I'll make sure they get it," she promised. Ethan smiled gratefully and left the desk. He thought about how privacy mattered and how sometimes people needed space after a scare. He would wait patiently. As he walked away, he noticed a small children's charity kiosk nearby, colorful stand with balloons and plush toys. Volunteers offered information about mentoring programs and early childhood education. He paused and approached the kiosk. A volunteer greeted him with a warm smile. "Can I help you?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "I'd like to know how to get involved," he said. "I'm looking to help support children who face neglect or danger." Her eyes lit up. She handed him a brochure and gave him details about a program that paired business professionals with at-risk youth. Ethan listened closely, jotting down notes. He felt a spark of purpose in his chest. After gathering all the information, Ethan stood by the kiosk and watched families walk by. He saw the mother of the twins, clutching her phone as she checked her messages. He saw their parents juggling shopping bags and strollers. He thought about all the children in the mall, some safe, some not. He felt determined to turn his guilt into action. He glanced at his watch. It was 1 o'clock. He had met Kathy and met the board at that time, just an hour ago. They would be calling him soon, confused by his absence. But he knew he could tell them where he was helping real people, real children in need. He squared his shoulders and headed toward the exit, feeling a strange excitement. For the first time in a long while, he was not chasing deals or status. He was chasing a chance to make a difference, and that, he realized, was worth every late minute. Ethan stepped out of the mall with the weight of his new purpose resting on his shoulders. He had just arranged meetings with local children's charities and social workers. Now he felt a mix of nervous excitement and determination. He hailed a car service and gave the driver the address of the first organization on his list. As the car weaved through city streets, Ethan stared out the window at storefronts and passing people. He felt a strange calm in his chest. For the first time in years, he was moving toward something that mattered more than profit. The car pulled up in front of a modest building painted pale yellow. A simple sign by the door read, "Bright Futures Children's Center." Ethan stepped out and smoothed his suit jacket. He paused to breathe in the fresh air, the faint scent of flowers blooming in a nearby planter. He walked inside, where he found a small waiting area with colorful chairs and drawings taped to the walls. A woman at the reception desk looked up and offered him a warm smile. "Good afternoon," she said. "It must be Mr. Royce. Thank you for coming." Her voice was gentle. She offered him a seat and handed him a cup of water. Ethan thanked her and sat down, feeling the softness of the chair under him. He glanced around and saw framed photographs of children laughing, playing games, and learning in small groups. The images made him smile. He realized he had never seen pictures like these in a high-rise office or during a boardroom presentation. Director of the center, a slender man in his 50s named Mr. Patel, arrived to greet him. He had kind eyes and a steady handshake. Mr. Patel led Ethan to a small conference room with a round table and a whiteboard covered in notes. Colorful markers lay in a cup on the table. Light streamed through a large window, making the room bright and warm. "Thank you for your interest," Mr. Patel said as they sat. "We serve children who face neglect, abuse, and poverty. We offer day programs, counseling, and mentoring, but our resources are limited." He opened a folder and showed Ethan a list of needs: art supplies, books, tutoring materials, and funds for field trips. Each item had a dashed line for a dollar amount. Ethan felt a knot in his throat when he read about the children who could not afford pencils or a bus ride to a museum. He listened as Mr. Patel described a young boy named Marco who struggled in school because he had no quiet place to study at home. He spoke of a girl named Aisha who loved to draw but had used the same torn sketchbook for months. He learned about groups where siblings separated during family crises longed to stay together. Every story pierced Ethan's heart. He imagined the fear the children felt when they thought no one cared. When Mr. Patel finished, Ethan sat quietly for a moment. Then he leaned forward and said, "I want to help. I'd like to fund your art program and supply new sketchbooks, pencils, paints, and brushes. I'll also cover the cost of field trips for the next year. And I'd like to commit to a quarterly visit to volunteer if you'll have me." Mr. Patel's eyes widened, clasped his hands, and said, "That would be life-changing for these kids. Thank you, Ethan. Truly thank you." Ethan nodded, feeling a swell of hope. They spent the next hour filling in details, discussing budgets, and planning events. They talked about after-school reading sessions and a summer camp project, where children could plant and care for a community garden. Ethan asked questions about how he could best use his time and resources. Every answer made him more determined. He left the center with a sense of purpose he had never known. Back in his car, Ethan reflected on the meeting. He thought of Anna and Lily's frightened faces in the mall. He thought of Marco and Aisha, whose lives he could change. He realized that every child he helped carried a piece of the same vulnerability he had once felt. His business successes had never filled that emptiness, but now each small step felt like a brick building, a bridge to a better future. A week later, Ethan arrived at a local elementary school for his first volunteer day. He entered a colorful classroom where 8 children sat at small desks. The teacher introduced him to the class. The children giggled as he shook their hands. He knelt to tell them his name and why he was there. "I'm here to read stories with you and help with your art projects," he said. The children cheered softly, and one boy clapped. Ethan sat on the floor and opened a picture book. He read, aloud in a calm voice, his tone gentle and warm. He watched the children's faces light up at the adventure in the story. When he finished, they begged for another. He agreed and read a second tale. Then he handed out sketchbooks and paints. The children painted bright suns, green trees, and houses with red roofs. Their laughter and chatter filled the room. He knew that this simple act treating and painting could make a lasting impression. At lunchtime, Ethan sat at a small table with the students. They ate sandwiches and fruit from paper bags. One little girl named Sophie asked him why he was a billionaire. He smiled gently and said, "My work is about helping people, and one important group is children. When I was young, I felt alone sometimes. I want to make sure nobody else has to feel that way." Sophie nodded seriously and said, "You make us happy." Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. He patted her hand and said, "You make me happy too." After lunch, he talked with the principal, Ms. Garcia, about extending the reading and art sessions. They planned a weekly program where volunteers from his company would come to help. The principal said this would boost the children's confidence and grades. Ethan agreed and promised to help find more volunteers. As he left the school, he felt lighter, as if a shadow had lifted from his shoulders. Over the next month, Ethan's involvement grew. He visited a youth shelter where he organized a clothing drive, collecting new winter coats and hats. He volunteered at a community center, teaching basic computer skills to older children. He set up a scholarship fund for high school seniors who wanted to go to college but lacked the money, spoke at local events, encouraging business leaders to give time, not just money. Each act, big or small, filled him with a renewed sense of joy. One evening, he received an invitation to a charity gala hosted by the city's largest nonprofit. He arrived in a simple tuxedo, choosing not to draw attention at the event. He mingled with social workers, artists, and parents. He listened to testimonials from teenagers who had overcome hardships with support. He watched a young man speak about how a mentor had guided him to become an engineer. Tears shimmered in Ethan's eyes. He stood and raised his glass, giving a short speech about the power of compassion. "Success is not measured by wealth alone," he said. "It is measured by the lives we touch and the hope we inspire. We all have the power to change the world, one child at a time." The audience applauded, and Ethan stepped down feeling humbled. After the gala, many approached him, offering to help with his programs. He exchanged ideas and contact information, feeling a network of kindness grow around him. A few days later, Ethan visited the mall again. He passed the fountain where Anna and Lily had been found. He looked around, half expecting to see the mother and her twins. Instead, he saw couples and families enjoying a quiet afternoon. He smiled at the memory, feeling gratitude that he had been there at the right moment. He realized he would never be the angry young man who kicked a cart. Instead, he was someone who would stop, listen, and help. As he walked past the empty spot where the cart had stood, he thought about the final part of his journey. He still had to reconcile his busy corporate life with these new commitments. He needed to share his vision with his company and encourage his peers to join him. He planned to create a foundation dedicated to children's welfare, one that would endure long after his own work was done. He felt excitement for what lay ahead. He stepped into his car and set the GPS for his office. His phone buzzed with messages, some about stock prices, others about upcoming meetings. He ignored them for a moment and opened a note on his phone where he wrote, "Remember what matters. Keep helping." Closed the note and smiled. His world had shifted, and he knew that each day offered a chance to make a difference. That thought in his mind, he started the engine and drove forward, ready for the final part of his transformation. Ethan woke early the next morning in his penthouse that overlooked the city like a quiet giant. The rising sun painted the sky in ribbons of pink and gold. He sat on the edge of his bed, feeling the soft sheets under his palms, and took a deep breath. Yesterday had been full of meetings, volunteer work, and a gala speech that still made his heart flutter with both pride and humility. Now, as he watched the city come to life, he felt a calm determination settle in his chest. Today was the day he would bring his company and his colleagues into the work he had started. He dressed in a simple shirt and trousers, leaving his usual suit and tie for later. He wanted to feel grounded. In his study, he opened his laptop and reviewed the proposal for the Children's Foundation. He had titled it Bright Tomorrow Foundation, in honor of the children he had met in the mall. In the names of Anna and Lily, whose courage had sparked his change, the foundation would focus on early education, art programs, counseling, and safe spaces for children at risk. It would partner with local schools, community centers, and social workers to reach kids who needed help. Ethan's assistant, Maya, arrived with a cup of coffee and a stack of papers. She placed the coffee beside him and smiled. "Good morning," she said. "I've arranged a meeting with the executive team at 9 and the board of directors at 11. Ethan nodded, grateful for her efficiency. "Thank you, Maya. Please prepare a slideshow about Bright Tomorrow. I want to show them real stories: Marco's struggle, Aisha's drawing dreams, the twins in the mall." Maya tapped her pen on the desk. "I'll include photos and quotes from the charity leaders." Ethan smiled. "Perfect. Let's change some lives." At 9, Ethan entered the conference room where 10 executives waited. They wore sharp suits and polished shoes, their faces unreadable. Ethan cleared his throat and clicked to the first slide. The room darkened, and on the screen appeared a photo of Anna and Lily in Ethan's arms, smiles replacing tears. He paused, watching their bright eyes, and spoke softly. These girls remind us why we have power, can make a difference, not just in business, but in people's lives. Clicked again, to images of children painting, reading, and playing in new clothes. He explained the foundation's plan, the budget, the timeline, and the impact metrics. He shared stories of Marco, who had improved his grades, and Aisha, whose art teacher wrote that she had found her voice through painting. The executives listened quietly. At the end, one man, Mr. Chen, leaned forward. "This is an impressive vision," he said. "But how will it benefit our company?" Ethan nodded, expecting the question. "By engaging our employees in volunteering, we boost morale and loyalty. By funding education, we invest in future talent. And by showing the world our commitment to social good, we improve our brand image. But most importantly, we do what is right." Another executive, Ms. Johnson, stood. "I'm in," she said. "I want to head the volunteer committee." Soon others followed, pledging dollars, hours, and resources. When they applauded, Ethan felt a warm glow in his chest. The foundation was no longer just his idea. It had become theirs too. He left the meeting and walked through the lobby, nodding to employees who greeted him. He felt proud not because of his wealth, but because of the spark of hope he had lit. He took the elevator to his top-floor office, where his brother Daniel waited. Daniel was lean and wears glasses. He worked in the family business but had never felt close to Ethan. Now he looked uneasy, but also curious. Ethan offered him a chair and began telling him about Bright Tomorrow. He described the children in the mall, the art center, the school, and the gala. As he spoke, Daniel's gaze softened. When Ethan finished, Daniel leaned back. "I didn't know this side of you," he said quietly. "I always saw you as the hard-driving businessman." Ethan smiled gently. "I needed a reminder that wealth means nothing without purpose." Daniel nodded slowly. "Count me in," he said. "Let me help. Let me be part of this." Ethan reached across the desk and clasped his brother's hand. "Thank you," he said. "It means the world." At 11, Ethan met the full board. He stood before a long table of important people. He told the same story, but with more focus on the facts. Projected reach of 5,000 children in the first year. Partnerships with 10 schools, and plans for annual reviews. He answered questions about governance, auditing, and sustainability. When he finished, the board chair, Mrs. Alvarez, tapped her pen. "I move we allocate 2% of profits to Bright Tomorrow Foundation annually," she said. The room echoed with nods and a second motion. The resolution passed unanimously. Ethan felt goosebumps. He thanked them and promised regular updates. After the meeting, employees gathered in the lobby. They clapped and cheered. Some held signs saying, "We're proud." Others asked how they could volunteer. Ethan smiled at each one. He realized that leadership was not only about commanding, but about inspiring. He told Maya to schedule an all-staff launch event next week, where they would celebrate the foundation and sign up volunteers. That afternoon, Ethan visited the art center again. He had promised to drop by after the meetings. He arrived to find children waiting to greet him, some holding paintings to show off. Aisha ran forward with her sketchbook, flipping pages too. "Show her latest drawings." Ethan knelt and studied a colorful scene of 2 children holding hands in front of a big sun. He pointed to the sun. "This is beautiful," he said. He captured hope. Aisha beamed. She pressed the sketchbook to her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. He toured the center, meeting teachers and volunteers. He sat in on a reading session, where he joined a small group of children reading a story about a brave lion. The children laughed at his funny voices, and he laughed too. He felt a joy he had never known in board meetings. When he left, the staff presented him with a framed drawing of Anna and Lily. Below the picture, in a child's writing, it said, "Thank you, Ethan." He hung the drawing in his lobby office. Each day he would see it and remember why he began this journey. That evening, Ethan invited his parents to dinner. They arrived in formal attire, expecting a celebration of his latest business triumph, led them to his private dining room, where candles flickered gently. The table held simple dishes: grilled fish, roasted vegetables, and fresh fruit. His mother looked around at the modest setting and raised an eyebrow. His father folded his arms. "So what are we celebrating?" he asked. Ethan stood and poured wine for them. "I want to tell you about something more important than profits," he said. He shared the story of Anna and Lily, the art center, the school, and the foundation he had founded. His parents listened in silence. When he finished, his mother's eyes glistened, and his father nodded slowly. His mother reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm proud of you," she said. His father cleared his throat. "You've shown more leadership here than in any deal," he admitted. Ethan felt tears prick his eyes. He squeezed his mother's hand and realized that his work had finally earned a different kind of approval. Later that night, Ethan returned to his study and sat by the window. The city lights twinkled below like stars fallen onto the streets. He opened a letter from the mall's lost and found office. Inside was a thank you note from Anna and Lily's mother, along with a photo of the twins smiling, safe in their home. He pressed the photo against his heart and whispered, "Thank you." He thought of all the children he still hoped to help. He closed his eyes and reflected on how a single kick had changed his life. That moment of frustration, when he had hurled his anger at an empty cart, had revealed the vulnerability of two small girls. Instead of running from that moment, he had faced it, and it had set him on a new path. He realized that kindness was not a weakness but a strength. Compassion was not a distraction but a purpose. In the weeks that followed, Ethan's life found a new balance. He continued to lead his company with skill, but now kept his calendar open for volunteer days, charity events, and board meetings of the foundation. He mentored children one-on-one, hosted art competitions, and spoke at schools about dreaming big. He saw the spark in their eyes when they painted a bright future for themselves. One afternoon, months later, Ethan walked through the same mall. He paused by the fountain and closed his eyes. He breathed deeply, feeling the rush of memories, the panic, the tears, the small, brave faces. He opened his eyes and smiled. Longer was he the angry young billionaire. He was a man who knew that true wealth was measured by the love you shared and the lives you lifted. He walked on, stepping lightly, carrying hope in his heart, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring.